Hey there again. Social Studies 20-1. I'm going to walk you through the Chapter 10 note-taking assignment. Chapter 10 is actually the last chapter of related issue number 2, which is our study of ultranationalism. So believe it or not, the related issue is about to come to an end. After ultranationalism, we're going to do some writing. We're going to do a source analysis for real. We're going to do a position paper for real that I will teach you how to do over the smart recorder. But there's one last element, one last piece we need to master before we can wrap up our look at related issue number 2, and that is self-determination. The role of self-determination as an act of nationalism, as an act of even ultra-nationalism. So to understand self-determination, understand that you might have your nation state, but from within that nation state, there might be a group of other nations that want to be independent, that want their own sovereignty. And we would call that push, that drive for sovereignty, self-determination. Quite often, self-determination can be realized through peaceful evolutionary means. Quite often, it's revolutionary and can become very violent. You could use the American Revolution as an example of self-determination in action, in this case, political self-determination. American colonists wanted independence. They were sick of the taxation without representation, so they went to war with the British and won their self-determination. They won their sovereignty. Now, that can be considered an act of nationalism or even ultranationalism, and too, because it became violent. You're killing people in the name of your country that you want born out of this act of self-determination. So just understand that self-determination would be the ability for a nation within a nation to direct its own affairs, to make its own political decisions, maybe even have its own country. That would be self-determination. It would be the splintering up of a bigger nation state. So if you think back to the Treaty of Versailles, part of the Treaty of Versailles was creating nation states within the old empire of Austria-Hungary to give those new nation states self-determination. They didn't want to be guided by the Austro-Hungarian Empire, so they got a degree of self-determination. And that's what the note-taking assignment is getting you to do, to explore this concept by looking at examples and case studies of self-determination. So if you follow along with me here, the first section of the note-taking assignment, and you're getting all the stuff from Chapter 10 of your notebook. You're taking point form notes. I've tried to be as direct as possible in asking you what to do. Uh, One form of self-determination can be decolonization. So if to colonize a country involves a mother country controlling other countries and bossing them around, decolonization would be giving those countries that you used to boss around independence and sovereignty. So if you think about Social 10-1 last year, although you probably forgot, the scramble for Africa involved European mother countries controlling colonies in Africa. So, for example, the British controlled South Africa. That is an act of colonization. If the British were to decolonize and give South Africa its independence, that would be decolonization and giving South Africa its own self-determination. Because today, South Africa has its own independent parliamentary government. Decolonization. So the examples you'll study in terms of decolonization as an act of ultranationalism would be India and Pakistan. You'll also take a look at Mozambique and the role that civil war can play in this too. Number 3, you'll be examining the concept of successor states. You probably forgot this. We covered this already back in about chapter 6. I gave you the term balkanization. So if you flip through your notes, you will find that term balkanization refers to the breakup of Balkan states. In other words, Yugoslavia was a big country created to give people of the Balkans independence after World War I and the Treaty of Versailles. In the 1980s and 90s, Yugoslavia broke up and splintered into a bunch of smaller nation states. Serbia, etc., etc. We call that splintering up, that breakup, Balkanization. Why? Because it happened in the Balkans. We talked about that about a month and a half ago, although I'm losing track of time with the lockdown. Uh, Last week, I couldn't decide if it was Tuesday or Wednesday. It turned out it was Thursday. No, I'm just joking. The third one we'll look at will be, I should say, the third one is successor states, the Balkanization, by looking at the breakup of the Soviet Union and the emergence of the Ukraine. You'll study Chechnya as well. Finally, we'll look at referenda as another form of self-determination and maybe nationalism or verging alternationalism, although it's not that violent. In Quebec, they've actually had a couple of referendums. A referendum is a national vote, a wide vote on something. And so the proposal in Quebec in 1980 and 1995 was, listen, do you want Quebec to separate from the rest of Canada and become a sovereign country? So the response to that vote would have directed what Quebec was going to do next. In both cases, by and large, most of the Quebecois voted in favor of staying in Canada. And so they never broke away and left, but you could call that, a push for self-determination. You can call that Quebecois nationalism. East Timor actually had a referendum that percolated into a violent conflict that you'll study as part of this note-taking assignment as well. Finally, third-party involvement involves a third party, an outside agency, an outside country. Maybe it's the UN, maybe it's the US, maybe it's Great Britain. Will step in and broker a peace between two sides to help them realize their own self-determination. I hope you understand what self-determination is. I think you do. We've talked about it a few times. When you think self-determination, think about decolonization, think balkanization, and the things we've just talked about. In all, you're looking about, I don't know, maybe 3 pages worth of notes for this. I'll give you lots of time to work on it. The next thing we'll take a look at is going to be building a spectrum that kind of encapsulates, gives you a bird's eye view of everything we've learned so far in Social 20-1. Garden variety nationalism and related issue 2, ultra nationalism. What we're going to start doing in the next big assignment is we're going to build up a body of evidence that we can use to evaluate nationalism. Should we pursue it no holds barred? Should there be restrictions applied to how far a nation pursues nationalism based on history and what we've examined in class? You're actually going to put together a spectrum. And what we're going to do from that spectrum, that body of evidence that we build, we're going to make a position paper, which is a skill you have to have mastered by the end of grade 12 for the diploma. So that'll be a separate assignment and lecture. I'll record how you write a position paper. I'll upload some exemplars of good and bad work for grade 11 position papers. I'll assign you the source and give you a few days to work on it, and we'll go from there. We're doing well. We're pushing along quite well here. I'm happy with the way things are going. I hope you're happy with the way things are going. I miss teaching you.